Good morning, everyone. How you doing? So what is it out here? Let me just check on something. 31 degrees here on the east coast of the good old USA. 31 degrees. It's kind of normal. February weather, it's kind of normal. We had a couple of days that were in the 60s. Actually, they were in the 60s, kind of getting close to 70s. So that was unusual for February. Usually it's pretty cold here in February. As a matter of fact, we haven't gotten any snow. I don't want to say it too loud, but we haven't gotten any snow around here. So there's something interesting that's been happening that I've been paying attention to that we're going to talk about in a few minutes. And that's that there's an exodus of talent from the Pro Apps team over there at Apple. Three people have left in the last 4 months. And these are people that we know. I'm not going to start off talking about that. We're going to get into that in a few minutes after we catch up on a few things of the week, plugins that are out there for Final Cut this week, a couple of tutorials I want to highlight. You want to talk a little bit about NAB. Let me just check on one thing. As I normally have to do, I got to move my coffee out of the way. Cheers to everybody that's drinking coffee. I'm drinking mine. But anyway, coffee. Let me just check on a couple of things here. Let me just see, are we on live here? I normally have. I'm drinking mine. Yes, audio sounds fine. Gonna post a little thing there, make sure that's all working like it's supposed to. I'm on my fresh install. I have 3 partitions on my MacBook Pro. Let's just see. Make sure this is working the way it's supposed to be working. Yes, it looks fine, looks smooth. So we have, let me pull that over. It's all right, it's right there. There we go. So I have three, they're not called partitions anymore. What are they called? They're called volumes. 3 volumes on my 2021 MacBook Pro. I have not decided if I'm going to get a 2022 MacBook Pro yet. This one's doing fine. I really like it a lot. I'm certainly not going to give it to Apple. I think they offered $1,200 or something ridiculous like that on a trade-in. So I'm going to sell it locally, probably on Facebook Marketplace. I don't do eBay. They charge 10%, and it's too much of a hassle if something goes wrong during the transaction. What I do is I live north of Washington, outside of Washington and west of Baltimore. So the area I live in, there's like 5 different states that could reach me within an hour. I have Virginia, I have Washington, D.C., I have Delaware, Pennsylvania, and of course all of Maryland. So usually I advertise when I have something expensive, I'll advertise it in Facebook Marketplace and say cash. So you bring cash. If you want the thing, you can ask me some questions. And come look at it, try it out. Everything's good. Then I'll sell it. So I haven't decided if I'm going to try that yet. I might put my MacBook Pro up to see if I can get the price that I want, because the new one's going to cost $5,000. So I'd have to get, between $3,000 and $4,000, I guess, or it's not worth it to me. Any event, that's a different story. Here's our friend Spencer Lewis. Good morning from Philadelphia, to my neighbor to the north. And our good friend Nathan McAvoy, he's here all the time as well. We've got some interesting things to discuss today about Final Cut Pro and the Pro Apps team, what's going on. Probably most people don't know, but like I said, we can get to that in a minute. So audio looks good. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube right now. That's what we're on, all 3. We're doing well. Here's my friend Gabriel Spalding. Gabriel, tell me when we first met. because I remember when we first met. Some of you I've known for a while. Gabriel I've known for quite a while. Gabriel made it into the Final Cut Pro documentary. He was in the Final Cut Pro Summit, the Final Cut Creative Summit documentary. So that was the first place I live streamed, was from the Final Cut Pro Creative Summit. Facebook Live, it was a 720, 720 square. You couldn't change it. That's what they did. And I was broadcasting from my room. I think it was the second year. Creative Summit. Yes, that's right. We met at the 2017 Final Cut Pro Creative Summit. I think that was the one that we were in the movie theater, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, that was the one. So every year the Creative Summit, when they had the Creative Summit, we haven't had one in person since 2019. We had not a Creative Summit, we had a tour this year that went out to different cities, but not a Creative Summit. Everybody gets together. But every year that they had one, they have some kind of a luncheon, special event kind of a thing. And the first year they had it in the Juniper Hotel. They had all the presentations in the Juniper Hotel. And then in 2017, that was 2016, the first one I went to. They had one in 2015, but that wasn't even in Cupertino, so I don't count that one. 2016, they had one. All the presentations were in the Juniper Hotel themselves, all the people that were talking and everything. That was very cool. Then 2017, we went out to a movie theater. The buses took us to a movie theater, and they had their presentations there. Now, one of the things I want to give recommendations to people who put on live presentations. If somebody's speaking in front of a screen, make sure you're not projecting text on top of their faces. Because I see that all the time. Somebody will walk in front of a screen and text is all across their face, and it makes it dark and it makes it look weird. Don't do that. Raise the screen up so it's above their heads, the projection screen. Anyway, that's what happened in 2017 at the Creative Summit. We were looking down a theater onto a stage, and people were in the dark. Their face was obscured by text. Just raise that up so it's above their heads, so that doesn't happen. I put on, when I worked at the National Archives, we had 100, 150 show live presentations per year. We had a 300-seat theater, and we had, a lot of live presentations every year, 100, 150. We always made sure the screen was above people's heads, and when they sat down and stuff, you don't have that issue with the projections in their face. Test it out beforehand. To get everything working. Or have them make sure they step to the side. Anyway, that's correct. We met at 2017 Creative Summit. That's correct. So, number one is about the Creative Summit. I hope that we're having an in-person Creative Summit in November this year. Here's our friend, Terj. Good afternoon from Norway. What time is it in Norway? I don't even know. It's 5 hours ahead GMT, Greenwich Mean Time. And right now it's 5 hours ahead in the UK. But the rest of the places I don't know, and I especially don't know Australia, because Australia is like wacky. It's like 14, one of them's 14, one of them's 14 and a half, one of them's 15. I can't keep track of this. That's too much, especially the one that's like a half hour off. That one is really, really strange. So let's do our morning salute to coffee. This is my special blend of coffee over there. That is 2 different kinds of coffee, fresh beans that I grind. Look how shiny they are. So the dark bean is it's not Midnight Express. What is it? Triple threat. The dark beans are triple threat. And then sometimes, I like to temper that triple threat coffee with something that's a little bit milder. So I put in there Pete's Mocha Java, which is an excellent, excellent blend by itself. But I like the dark roast because I add a lot of coffee. I add a lot of I add a lot of cream. I like it strong, but I add a lot of cream at the same time, so it's more like chocolate milk. It's more like chocolate milk. I think my girlfriend identified it one time. She goes, "This tastes like chocolate milk." Hot chocolate. Sorry. 4:15 p.m. there. Okay, 4:15 p.m. So you must be 6 hours difference for me. And Roz says, "Good morning from Comex, British Columbia, Canada." Very good. Or some of our friends from Canada. She says, "Like a latte." Exactly like a latte. I have an actual espresso cappuccino machine that I pull out sometimes, and I actually make the lattes. So it's like 2 shots. It's like really dark. I put two big scoops in. I use an AeroPress, and I let that steep for 3 minutes. The reverse AeroPress technique. And so the coffee is very concentrated. And then I put in cream. Today it's actually cream. Sometimes I use half and half, but today it's actually cream. I like the taste. I like the taste a lot. As a matter of fact, if I had to give things up, the first thing I'd want to do is I want to be able to have oxygen so I can breathe. Number 2, I'd want to have water so I don't get dehydrated. Number 3, I want to have coffee. Coffee before food for me. That's what I'd like. So I have a pour-over kettle, stainless steel pour-over kettle, AeroPress, and I grind my own coffee, and I bring that with me when I travel. I bring that whole setup with me. So when I wake up in the morning in my hotel room, it's just like I'm here at my studio, my house. I wake up, stumble around, brush my teeth. And here I feed the cats. I don't feed the cats when I'm on the road. And then I make coffee. I don't want to have to get dressed to go down to the hotel lobby or out to Starbucks to get coffee. No. I want to just, do it in my room before I even start the day. That's how I start the day every morning is coffee. So I bring the whole setup. As a matter of fact, we're going to be streaming live from NAB here in a couple of months. That's what we're planning on. And I'll show you my setup. And not only the streaming setup, but I'll show you the coffee setup. She says, Roz says, "Love that. I like cappuccino." I like cappuccino as well, but the latte has more. I'm not sure I've had both. The first time I had good coffee was in Paris, and it was a cappuccino over and over again. I'd order them, and I'd order cappuccinos because of my French teacher in high school. She said, "Café au lait," she used to say, "Café au lait, cappuccino." So I kept ordering café au lait, but cappuccinos are great. I mean, I love the frothed, hot, and I like real cream, not skimmed milk and not soy milk. Real cream, or at very least half and half. I think they call that brevet. Gabriel says, "French press for me, anodyne beans." Is that a dark roast? I'll have to look that up. I get that. I like trying different things, but I've really settled on these 2 blends. The Triple Threat comes from a roaster in New York. I forget what their name is. Furnace Hills Coffee. And the reason I got exposed to them, because they used to be here in Westminster, Maryland, right where I live, up from where I live. And I went in there one time to an actual roaster on Main Street, and it was smoky inside. But the smoke was from roasting coffee beans. It was like the best smell ever. So I kept on going with different varieties till I liked Triple Threat. But sometimes it's a little bit strong, so I temper it with the Mocha Java beans. Yes, fresh ground is the way to go. I grind it right before I brew it, except I don't bring my grinder on the road. It's too big. I have a burr grinder. I have 2 burr grinders. I don't bring it on the road. So I grind it the day before or the morning before I leave, and I measure out how many scoops I'm going to need for how many days. Usually I go 2 cups When I'm on the road, 2 cups per day, sometimes 3. So if I go 2 to 3 per day, I just multiply the days. So I make sure I have 15 to 20 scoops in my container so I don't run out of coffee. And then I bring the AeroPress, and I bring the filters, and I bring the scoopers and the stainless steel pour-over kettle and make sure it works. One time I brought one to NAB and it didn't work. I had to go find one somewhere else. Maxwell House for me, many years drinking. I used to do Maxwell House before I went to Paris. I'd get fresh Maxwell House and use it. But when I went to Paris, now I came back and I was on the search for great coffee and I couldn't find it anywhere. And in those days, that was in the 80s. And then it finally started coming around more and more. I have a hard hand frother, frothed half and half cream really helps balance the dark coffee. Exactly. So the dark coffee, I don't drink black coffee. I could if I had to. If I needed some good coffee, it didn't have any cream, I could put a little bit of Splenda or sugar in it and drink it. But I prefer strong coffee tempered with real cream or at half and half at least. I don't like it with milk, and I don't like it with skim milk for sure, or soy milk or any of the flavors. I like coffee that tastes like coffee. All right, that's enough coffee talk for today, at least for the time being. We're going to talk about Final Cut Pro. Let's go over a couple of other things. Let me just see what I have here. So let me pull this up. So one of the things that has happened this week, or last week, there's a very important bug fix for Final Cut Pro. And it's not Final Cut Pro. It's not in Final Cut Pro. The bug fix is Mac OS 13.2.1. There is a problem with large libraries in Final Cut Pro that was identified by people who work with Final Cut Pro on the Apple side, and it was Mac OS. So if you're using Mac OS 13.2 and you're having problems with large Final Cut Pro libraries, definitely update to Mac OS 13.2.1 because it fixes the bug that was introduced in Mac OS 13.2. Now, I'm on 13.1, so I didn't experience that. I never went to 13.2, so I did not experience the bug. Right now I'm on 13.1, Mac OS 13.1. I don't have that bug. So if you do have the bug and you're on 13.2, definitely upgrade to Mac OS 13.2.1. Absolutely do that. That's one of the best things you can do. Now, another thing is, so I started using Final Cut Pro at version 1, and I got certified as an end user, not as a trainer, as an end user with Final Cut Pro 14.5, which they called Final Cut Pro HD at the time. Here's the interesting thing about Final Cut Pro HD. Let me pull this up real quick, because I remember this very specifically. Let me see, where is that? Here we go. I remember this. This was an odd, very odd thing for Apple to do, and they haven't done it since that I know of. Okay? Apple introduced, let me just pull these up here. Apple introduced a brand new version of Final Cut Pro on a Sunday night. On a Sunday night. I remember it came out, the news came out on a Sunday night. Now that's an odd time. This was Final Cut Pro. They called it Final Cut Pro HD. It was Final Cut Pro 4.5. Very, very odd. Have they ever done that before on a Sunday night? Now there's a reason why they did that. Because NAB started on Monday. That's why they introduced the new version of Final Cut Pro HD 4.5 on a Sunday night. The press release might have been on a Monday, but the actual news broke on a Sunday night. And I thought that was very, very strange. Let me just check something here. Yeah, there you go. That's what I thought. There you go. April the 18th, 2004 was a Sunday. They have never done that since then. They brought out a brand new major version of Final Cut Pro on a Sunday. Sunday, April the 18th, 2004. And once again, the only reason they did that was because of NAB. NAB started on Monday, and they wanted to be out ahead of the crowd. That's exactly why that was on a Sunday. And I remember that. I was sitting home like, wow, there's a new version of Final Cut Pro? That was in the days when they charged for a new update to Final Cut Pro. If you had 4 and you went to 4.5, there was a charge. If you didn't have it at all and you went to 4.5, it was like $900, $8,000, something like that. I remember that very, very specifically. And the reason I remember it, let me just bring this back up. The reason I remember it was because right after that came out, I got a Final Cut Pro, not right after, but shortly thereafter, Final Cut Pro, Apple Certified Pro, Final Cut Pro HD Level 1 certification. And that was October 2004. So that was about 6 months after they introduced it. I had the ability to get certified. And I remember I went down to the Washington Convention Center. I'm not sure what was down there then. It might have been some kind of government GV Expo or something like that. But I remember going to that class. It was a big, big class, and it was a Final Cut Pro certification class. I don't know if it was Future Media Concepts, but it was Abbas Shapiro. I remember it was multi-day event. So I took that class, and one of the questions he asked were, do you want me to go over the exam, some of the exam questions? And I said, absolutely. I mean, I raised my hand and made a lot of noise. I don't know if anybody else really cared. But I remember walking into that event. This was peculiar. And they couldn't get the PA up and running. I walked in before it started. They couldn't get the PA working, And I walked over there. I think I helped them. I said, you got to do this and X, Y, and Z, because I did live sound for years. But that's when I got my very first Apple Final Cut Pro HD Level 1 certification. This was an end user certification. That was October 2004, about 6 months after it was introduced at NAB. Now, after that, I got Final Cut Pro 5 certified as an end user. And then I went to New York. I worked for a company out of Baltimore. I went to New York and got it to be an Apple certified trainer for Final Cut Pro 5. I remember that. The company paid for me to go to New York. They paid for my hotel. They paid for my expenses. They paid for everything because I was their Final Cut Pro support person at the time. This was in Baltimore. I don't think they do much Final Cut Pro support anymore. They just do other things. They do Premiere and maybe some Avid stuff. But anyway, that's how I started. That's when I first got my Final Cut Pro trainer certification. So what else do we have? Well, first I want to say good morning to everybody. Good morning. Good morning from all around the world, whatever you're tuning in. We are going to get back to talk about one of the main topic for today is what's going on with the Pro Apps team. Because in the last 4 months, there's been 3 major people that have left the Pro Apps team. 3 major people that have left the Pro Apps team. Before that, there's an additional 5 people that have left the Pro Apps team. So in the last 3 or 4 years, we've lost 8 major people from the Pro Apps team. That's a lot. Now, these people were not the engineers. They weren't primarily. They're marketing people and et cetera, et cetera. So the question that I have, we're gonna name them because I'm friends with some of them and stuff, and I'm not gonna discuss any conversations I may or may not have with any of them. That's not what I'm doing. I'm going just from the outside. I'm interested. Why so many people are leaving the Pro Apps team? Some of them may saw it was time to retire. That very well could be. But, Apple's a big company, right? Do you think everybody gets along inside of Apple? No, they don't. I know that for a fact. I've seen it in action at different events where there's a little bit of, let's say, contention going on. I've seen it in action. So not talking about the Final Cut Pro team, I'm talking about people outside the Final Cut Pro team. People outside. But so Apple's a big corporation. Of course there's issues, but it just seems like it's a lot of people leaving the Pro Apps team. How does that affect the development of Final Cut Pro? Well, the question I would say is, are you satisfied with the pace of development of Final Cut Pro since 10.4? That's what I would ask you. If you're satisfied with the pace that Final Cut Pro has been developed since 10.4. Now, 10.1, 10.2, 10.3, 10.4, major updates. We had updates after that. 10.4.4 was a big feature update. And then we got 10.5, and then we got 10.6. And they're kind of medium-level updates. So for the last 4 years, the pace of Final Cut Pro development is just like, it's gone way down compared to previous versions of Final Cut. So the reason I'm bringing that up is because that's the same time these people started leaving the Pro Apps team. That's the same time. Now, like I said, I know some of these people, and I'm not going to discuss whether I have or have not talked to them. That's not what this is about. But this is my observation as a Final Cut Pro trainer, as a Final Cut Pro editor, as somebody in the Final Cut Pro community. I've been around for a long time. Final Cut Pro Radio started year 7, January. The first person we had on was Sam Messman. And right after that, I had Ken Stone on, who had one of my favorite Final Cut Pro websites of all time. Now, he stopped when Final Cut Pro 10 came out. He was retiring and stuff and didn't want to do it anymore. But kenstone.net had the best Final Cut Pro website of all time. It's fantastic resource for years and years and years. So I interviewed Sam Messman. I interviewed Ken Stone pretty quickly on there. And that's the last time I think that I've talked to Ken. We were going back and forth about different things. But the transition and everything, I've interviewed Michael Horton from LACPUG and stuff. Dan Berube. I don't know if Dan's doing a Super Meet this year or not. I haven't been able to get a confirmation that he is, so have to see. But anyway, started year 7 with Final Cut Pro Radio, the podcast. I've broadcasted continuously for all these years. Never took off, even in the summertime where things are dog dead slow. Never took off. We have millions of podcast downloads of the audio podcast. So I've been around for a while, and as an observer of Final Cut Pro and the events surrounding different things and updates, the development of Final Cut Pro, the slowdown of development of Final Cut Pro coincides with these people leaving the team. It coincides. Whether there's a direct relationship or not, I don't see how there couldn't be some relationship to that. But there has been some slowdown in the development. Don't you agree? Is anybody out there satisfied with the development of Final Cut Pro over the last 3 or 4 years? And listen, don't tell me about Apple Silicon. Don't tell me about Metal and Metal 2. I know all about that, okay? Every app developer has to take care of those issues. Everybody has to switch over to metal. Everybody has to switch over to metal 2. Everybody has to switch over to Apple Silicon. That's not anything that's unique to the Final Cut Pro team. So don't bring those subjects up if you talk about development. The other thing don't bring up to me is stability and performance. Of course, we want stable and we want performance. Okay? Of course we want that. That's a given. That's a baseline. Every update should have stability and should be a little bit faster than the one before that. Is that part of the development? Sure. I'm talking about innovation. I'm talking about innovative features, okay? Now, we had 2 feature updates in 2022. Just 2 for the entire year. We had dupe detection, right? That's a good feature update that we've been asking for 11 years, especially Hollywood, right? But it's not innovative. Everybody else has dupe detection except for Final Cut. So when they brought that in, absolutely applause for the Final Cut Pro team, but it's not innovative. That's not what I'm talking about. Do I appreciate it? Absolutely. That feature was missing for 11 years. Now that they have it, fantastic, great job. But it's not innovative. Okay? Everybody has that. However, the second feature that we got a year ago was voice isolation. That was, nobody was expecting that. And that one is more innovative than dupe detection, just on the innovation scale. I use both of them, and I appreciate that both of them are there. But that's all we got for the entire of 2022. Those are the only features that we got in 2022. Are you satisfied with 2 feature updates per year? I'm not. I need more than that. We need more feature updates. I always say I'm the Final Cut Pro eternal optimist, and I am so far. Let's see what 10.7/11, I'm calling it 10.7.11, because whether it's 11 or whether it's 10.7, let's see what that brings. And just exactly like they've done in the past, when they brought out Final Cut Pro 4.5 HD on a Sunday night before NAB, and they brought out ProRes RAW around NAB, and they have introduced other updates to Final Cut Pro around NAB, even though Apple wasn't there specifically, like on the show floor. I don't expect that to happen, but they certainly can do presentations, and they have been in the convention center, and they have done official Apple presentations in the convention center at NAB. They announced 2 million users in 2017, and they announced 2.5 million users in 2018. I think those are the right dates, or 2016 and 2017. I can't remember, but they made those major announcements worldwide at NAB. They do appreciate NAB, and they do utilize it sometimes, the Final Cut Pro team / Apple. I expect the same thing to happen this year. I expect 10.7.11 to come out right between now and NAB to utilize all the press that's around NAB. Got a couple of comments. Spencer Lewis says, also, Colombian and Cuban roasts, love the taste of both. Absolutely. I love Colombian. I really like it a lot. I like darker Colombian. Final Cut is either getting a major update or it's dying. That's what it feels like from the consumer's perspective. The more time goes on, the more it becomes a secondary tool or one to grow beyond. I am not going to argue with that perspective, Tyler. All right, let's see what this one says. From our friend Gabriel. Voice isolation is just the tip of the iceberg. I would like to see more ML features, machine learning features like speech to text. Absolutely, Gabriel. Face detection with keywords. Let's see what else that says. With keywords like Photos already has, intelligent color masking tools, etc. Speech to text. Let's talk about that for a minute. That's a great point, Gabriel. Very good point. Everybody is doing speech to text. The AI, whatever that thing is. I bought that one app that does very, very fast speech to text. That absolutely is going to be built into Final Cut. That absolutely, you won't need a third-party plugin to do that. So it goes through your video, your audio, translates all the speech to text. It can place those things on the timeline as titles or as captions, whatever you prefer. But you don't have to do it that way. You can also go into the clip, look at the text, click on it, and it'll take you to that section of the clip, like Lumberjack does now. I can absolutely see that being built into Final Cut. That would be, this is the kind of things that we need. So Final Cut Pro 10.7, look, every time people are disappointed because of the last update, because of lack of updates, because things are slow, I always say, let's wait till 10.7. So now I'm saying it again. Let's wait to 10.7, 7.11, whatever the heck they want to call it. Let's see what they got. Let's have them show the cards. At that point, we will know if the exodus of people from the Final Cut Pro team is affecting the development of Final Cut Pro. It seems like, okay, Final Cut Pro 10.4.4 was a big update. Even 10.4.9 was a big update. Okay, both of those, 10.4.4 and 10.4.9, were both big updates within 10.4. Then 10.5 came out, and it's just like a minuscule update. Oh, we're supporting Apple Silicon now. Oh, we got to do this. We got to do this. We got to do this. But no new features. It was very, very sparse. 10.6, yeah, it had the mask tracking and stuff. And then 10.6.2 came out last year with 2 features. Yes, that's fine. And I'm not saying that we don't appreciate those. I'm just saying compare 10.5 and 10.6 to 10.1, 2, 3, and 4. Compare it to yourself. There's no comparison between 10.5 and 10.6 and 10.1, 2, 3, and 4. No comparison. 10.1 through 4, 10.4 gave us new features all the time. But I'm asking the audience, let's wait for 10.7. Let's see what happens with 10.7. Apple is slowly killing the Final Cut. It continues to be an incredible application despite the few updates, but DaVinci Resolve also as an editor is more and more of a temptation. So there's a couple of things I want to say about that. I'll give you 3 things. Number 1 is I own DaVinci Resolve Studio. It's a fantastic, fantastic NLE. I love it. It would be my main desktop NLE if Final Cut Pro wasn't around. I would absolutely be my number 1. Number 2 is I love LumaFusion on the iPad. I think LumaFusion, it's available on Silicon Macs as well. If they dedicated some more time and actually developed a desktop version of LumaFusion, I'd be all over that. I just love the way they implement things. They just do fantastic, fantastic job. They have a magnetic timeline, but they've improved on it from what Final Cut has. It has more options. They just do a lot of really, really cool things. So if LumaFusion came out with an official, you can use it now on the desktop, absolutely. I use it on the iPad mostly, but I really, really, really like LumaFusion a lot. So between DaVinci Resolve and LumaFusion, I would be fine if something happened to Final Cut. But I'd be really aggravated if something happened to Final Cut at the same time. I'd be very disappointed, and I'd be very aggravated if something happened. I don't expect that to happen. I have complete faith in the Final Cut Pro team. When you're talking about the Final Cut Pro team, we're talking about engineers, the developers, the people that are on the ground day in and day out, 40 hours a week. They're working there, but of course they have to listen to what their bosses say and what their bosses want them to do. And then those bosses have to listen to another layer of Apple bureaucracy, and they have to listen to another layer of Apple bureaucracy. So it's not just the team. They don't run the team in isolation. Gabriel says, I'm routinely blown away by the features Resolve produces, but going back to tracks and bins is a huge step backwards. We do need new features, but we have it much better than people seem to think. We do have it better. When I do documentaries, I'm still using Final Cut. I like, here's what I'd like. I'd like to have the magnetic timeline without tracks for video. I don't mind tracks for audio at all. When I'm doing a recording session in Logic, I have I have 32 tracks sometimes. I want everything to stay in one place. I don't want it to be going up and down. Yes, you can use rolls. I know all about that. But I like it initially. Using audio in tracks is fine for me. I'm not sure how that would work with the magnetic timeline and stuff, but so I don't mind tracks for audio. Yes, I know the advantage in Final Cut for video, and I understand people on both sides of the arguments. Oh, tracks versus non-tracks. The majority, there's millions of editors that use tracks every day, and they do a great job, and they function with them. We, as Final Cut Pro editors, know the advantage of the magnetic timeline. It's fantastic. I want to pull this one clip over here, and it's got all these things attached to it, titles and subtitles and audio and everything else. I don't have to lasso all of that and move it down the track. I just grab the main track and the main clip in the timeline and move it, and everything is attached and goes with it. And the gap closes up, and it's fantastic. It's fantastic. So I really like it as well. It's my main editor, but I've been with it for like 20 years, like I said, over 20 years. But DaVinci Resolve is at a breakneck pace of development and adding features. I just want Final Cut Pro to give us more than 2 features a year. Does anybody think that's unreasonable? Is it unreasonable for me to ask the Final Cut Pro team to give us, as Final Cut Pro faithful, we're the faithful ones, we've been here all along, can you give us more than 2 features per year? That doesn't seem like it's unreasonable. I don't mean 3. I mean, give us a solid update with 6 or 8 features, new features. We haven't had that for so long, I forget what it's like. 10.4.4 and 10.4.9 both had really, really useful features. So 10.4.9 came out in August. When did Final Cut Pro updates come out in August? Came out in August, 10.4.9. It was fantastic that it had, I forget exactly what it had. It had something to do with proxy, media workflows and stuff. I really, really like that. My latest goal is to install and learn Command Post, a way to add some features. Yes. Chris Hawking, he's been on the show many times. We've talked about him. Chris Hawking has added a scrolling timeline to Final Cut Pro with Command Post. I haven't got around to adding that yet, but the thing is, I want to keep pressure on the Final Cut Pro team. I don't want them to point over here, use Command Post for this, and use this plugin for that, and use this for that, and use Lumberjack, and use this. No. I want some of these features to be native in Final Cut Pro. I don't want a skeletal Final Cut Pro that needs all these different plugins and stuff to be completely functional. Some yes. But Command Post, look, Chris Hawking's fantastic, okay? He's a fantastic resource for Final Cut Pro. He's the one that just came out with BRAW support. You can now use BRAW inside of Final Cut Pro natively without transcoding. That's Chris Hawking. Everybody told him it can't be done. It can't be done. Number one, they told him you're not going to be able to do that. Number two, they told him you'll never get done on the App Store. Number one, he got it done. Number two, he got it on the App Store. Okay? And besides that, he's been doing Command Post for years. And Command Post is free. It's free. I told him he should have started charging for Command Post a long time ago, but he didn't. He hasn't done it so far. I think maybe Command Post Pro or something. We'll have to see. Have to see how that goes. I would happily pay $2.99 every single year for it to help increase the pace of development. I'll go 99, Gabriel. The $2.99 for the first one and 99. I agree. I don't mind paying for major updates, but here's the thing with that. So we know in 2017 or 2018, I think, 2018, they announced 2.5 million seats of Final Cut Pro. So this is 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023. 5 years later, okay, if you go from 2018, 2.5 million, 4 years later, don't we think we're at 5 million users by now? 5 million users at $2.99 a pop. That's 1.5 billion with a B dollars that Final Cut Pro has made just from the app itself. I think the math's right there. I think it's right. 2.5, well, 5 million times 300. Yeah, it'd be 1.5 billion with a B dollars. That can fund Final Cut Pro team, I think, pretty effectively. And I know it picked up pace during the pandemic because Apple was offering that 90-day free trial. I think they're still offering it. 90 days is a long time to try Final Cut Pro. Final Cut Pro, for sure, is my number one that I'd recommend to most people. There are a few exceptions. If you wanted to go into Hollywood and be specifically a Hollywood editor, I would say learn Final Cut for sure. It's $2.99. Buy it on your own, but you got to learn Avid. Okay, you got to learn Avid. If you're going to be a colorist, if you want to be a colorist as your main thing, get Resolve. It has, besides coloring being an industry standard color, it has get DaVinci Resolve. You have color, you have audio, you have fusion, you have an editor. So definitely get that. It's $300 once again, one-time fee. But if you're going to go like into Hollywood, I would say, okay, you have to learn Avid. You can learn Final Cut, learn Resolve, learn LumaFusion, but you got to learn Avid. So most people, I would say Final Cut for sure. Eric Emmerich says, once you grasp magnetic timeline, no NLE is faster, not even close. That's a big advantage. That's true. But how many years can you rest on that laurel? How many years can you say, well, but yeah, we don't have these features, and some of the features are standards. Scrolling timeline, for example, it's a standard feature. Everybody has that. Until last year, dupe detection, everybody has that. These are standard features. These are not even innovative features. You can't keep saying, but Final Cut Pro is faster and use that as your only criteria. It is faster. It is faster. I edit faster on Final Cut than anything else. Now, part of that's because I've been trained on it. I know it pretty well inside and out. But you need more than just fast. You need more. They have to give us some of these, features that people have been asking for. How about a better audio mixing system, whatever it is, roll space mixer, plug-in support and tracks and stuff. I mean, not tracks with horizontal tracks, but vertical like a mixer. Whatever they're going to do. I've heard that's been in there for years, but they haven't released it yet. I've heard of scrolling timeline's been in Final Cut Pro for years, but they haven't updated it yet. Plug-in-dependent workflows are problematic, particularly when working on a team. There are certain features that must be native. Absolutely. That's what I'm saying. That's exactly what I'm saying, Gabriel. I appreciate every single third-party plug-in developer that's out there that has helped with Final Cut Pro. 1 second. Lumberjack Systems, Beauty Box from Digital Anarchy, Motion VFX, Roger Bolton with Core Mount. All of these are fantastic third-party plugins. Of course, Final Cut can't do all of those things, like plugins, titles and things. Yes, I want people to develop that. But some of these basic things, look, it took 5 years to get remove attributes. It took 5 years to get remove attributes. It took 11 years, almost 11 years, to get dupe detection. These are basic NLE features that should be incorporated. This is what I'm talking about, some of this basic stuff. The text, speech to text, let's get that in there. That would be a fantastic feature to have. Now, of course, people talk about, and I like this when people get in this discussion, feature creep. We don't want feature creep. We don't want feature creep. Oh, okay, I have a new term for you. Feature sleep. Okay? Feature sleep. The development pace of Final Cut Pro over the last 3 or 4 years has been feature sleep. There's no chance of it being feature creep at this point. If they just catch up on things. Now, like I said, I use it all the time, and I like it. It's still my favorite NLE, but it certainly is not keeping pace with other NLEs that are out there. Yes, it's fast. Yes, it has a magnetic timeline, which can be a blessing or a curse depending on which side you're on. But let's get back to the pace of development that you had when you were doing 10.1, 10.2, 3, and 4, up to 10.4.9. Let's get back to that pace, not so much the pace that's been developed since for 10.5 and 10.6. Are there really people actively working as a team on Final Cut Pro? In my observation, Apple under Tim Cook's leadership only develops things for the masses and not some. Yeah, of course there's a team. There's a Pro Apps team, there's a Pro Video team, there's a Final Cut Pro team, there's an iMovie team. Of course there's teams, and there's dozens and dozens of people on those teams. 2016, we went to the Final Cut Pro Creative Summit. We go to the Pro Apps team. I've met them. We've met them. Gabriel and I, we've met them in person at the Creative Summit. I've met them at NAB. I know, of course there's a team. The problem is there's an exodus of talent coming off the team. I mean, I think it's a problem, and it coincides with the severe slowdown of Final Cut Pro feature updates. It absolutely coincides with that. We'll go over that specifically in a minute. Yes, definitely. That's about the third-party plugin support, I think. I feel like Apple's play for Final Cut with better developer tools for Final Cut. I hope an API for ProRes RAW, so many WWDC will yield Final Cut Pro News. I'm hoping for Final Cut Pro News at NAB. WWDC is not a broadcast event. It's not broadcast. It's not video production. It's not cameras and stuff. NAB is. NAB is where Final Cut Pro needs to come out. NAB, when I walk around NAB and I broadcast live, any place that's got Final Cut Pro on their screen, I'm drawn to it like a magnet, and I will go there. And there's places that I always stop. I always stop at the Blackmagic booth. It is immense. It is the biggest, well-designed, happiest place to be at NAB. It's fantastic. So I always go to Blackmagic, usually every single day. I stop over there and talk to people. It's fantastic. I even have friends over there at Adobe. I'll stop over to Patrick Southern's a friend over there at Adobe, Michael Cioni. I didn't get a chance to see him last year. He's over there now at Adobe because Adobe bought Frame.io, sold out to Adobe. They sold out to Adobe, and now Adobe owns them. They own them. Whatever Adobe says, that's what goes on with Frame.io. I know there were problems with Frame.io recently. Maybe some features are held back due to Intel support. Maybe we'll see Final Cut Pro 11 in 2023 that ditches Intel. I don't think so. That's Brad. That's our friend Brad Olson. I don't think so. I think we got another couple years with Intel support for Final Cut. Now, all the features are not going to be available that are available for Apple Silicon, for sure. They're not going to be available for Intel. Some of the features are going to be Final Cut Pro, are going to be in Apple Silicon specific. Like, I'll give you the perfect example. I'm using Ecamm Live here. Ecamm Live version, I'm on a beta version 4.0.2 beta 1. It records. I can broadcast to 10 different places with Ecamm Live now. I've quit my Restream subscription. I can broadcast to 10 different places, and Ecamm Live will record ISO videos at 1080p from every guest that I have on. So when I do a like when I did the Final Cut Pro Aussies a couple weeks ago, I had all the individual videos of every guest that I could work with in post. I put it in a Final Cut Pro multicam. It makes it very easy. That's dependent on Apple Silicon. They can't do it on Intel. So that's, for example, going forward, we're going to see more and more and more features that require Apple Silicon. But anyway, Brad said maybe some features are held back, but other features are not. I mean, other M2 features or M1 features or not. I just don't want to give them excuses. They have to earn their right, and I love them dearly. Listen, first off, absolutely applause to the entire Final Cut Pro team. Absolutely, that you guys are doing I'm not going to say you're doing a great job. I'm saying you're doing a good job. At this point, I would give Final Cut Pro a B+. I'm not sure if any of the NLEs are A in the A category. They're, B+, maybe an A-. But Final Cut, you just need to give us some features. You got to, and listen, 10.7 could be the one. That's what I'm hoping for. 10.7 around NAB, blows everybody out of the water, text-to-speech, blah, 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 mixing board, scrolling timeline, whatever the heck they're going to do. I guess there is, what Brad said, there is some intel. They are looking a little bit behind, and we got to support this OS and these machines for a little while further. But just, they've already made, Final Cut Pro, the cinematic mode. Doesn't that require an Apple Silicon? I thought it did. Let me put that back up there. I missed what he said. Tyler says, I fear Apple doesn't involve on Final Cut Pro because the Pro Apps team doesn't want to crush what third-party developers are doing. No, I don't believe that at all. Have you ever heard of the, what was that famous thing that time that Apple just came out and squashed something? No, Apple comes out, if they want it, the feature to be in Final Cut, they'll put it in Final Cut. They're not going to worry about specifically if the third-party developer has it. They've done it in the past multiple times. $298 a year for a brand new Final Cut Studio, all apps version 7 integrated in one. DaVinci Resolve is about that price for live. Well, DaVinci Studio is only $299, and that's pay once, and that's it. You don't have to keep paying each update. Roz says she has to run. Thanks tons, Richard. Thank you for stopping by. What are your thoughts on Final Cut Pro on iPad when you can get the full version of DaVinci Resolve for $90 on iPad? I think there'll be a version of Final Cut. I think there could be a version of Final Cut on the iPad. I don't think it's going to be the full version of Final Cut. It's going to be a light version or Final Cut for the iPad. It's there's too many things at this point that are missing. I mean, like I bring up all the time. How do I connect I have 3 RAIDs, Thunderbolt RAIDs. How do I connect those? They have to have drivers for Mac. I have thousands of Final Cut Pro plugins. How am I going to get those over to the iPad? I'm not going to rebuy them. I'm not going to do that. Remember when Apple was one of the biggest? Yes, I do. NAB showroom that time showed that they were committed to Pro Video. But Steve Jobs put the kibosh on Apple doing these big presentations, not just NAB. Remember Macworld used to be every January? At some point, Apple said, we're not doing that anymore. We're not going to do the big shows. Apple gets millions and millions of views when they do their own live streams and presentations. They don't need to have a big presence on the show floor. But if they're smart, they put out a big Final Cut Pro update right before NAB or at NAB, and then some of the vendors will have the update. Future Media Concepts would be one. Other vendors will be showing off the new update. They also can do like they've done before, where the Pro team, the Pro Apps team, Final Cut Pro team, they do a special free presentation at NAB in the convention center in one of the side classrooms. I've seen 2 of those. Before that, the year before that, in 2016, they were across the street at, I think, the Renaissance Hotel. Brad would know what the hotel was. They were across the street supporting that. So they're there supporting it, but they don't need to spend tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars on the show floor. I mean, that would be great if they did, but that era, Steve Jobs stopped that a long time ago. I don't see that returning, but they can have a presence in NAB. WWDC is not as important to Final Cut Pro as NAB. NAB is much, much more important because NAB reaches people outside of the WWDC ecosystem. The WWDC ecosystem is Worldwide Developers Conference. It's not the Final Cut Pro Developers Conference. It's not Pro Video Developers Conference. It's not Logic Pro Developers Conference. That can be a small part of WWDC, but NAB is all about video production. It's all about NAB. It's all about NLEs. It's all about cameras, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the place that Final Cut Pro belongs. That will reach a much, much bigger audience. Speaking of that, let me pull this up. So this is very cool. We just had this come up this week. NAB show surpasses 1,000 exhibitors. So last year, 2022, NAB had about 900 exhibitors, plus or minus a little over 900. So we're 2 months out to NAB, and it's already surpassed 1,000 exhibitors, already surpassed 1,000. So in 2019, which was the last big NAB, they were about 1,600. So we've still got a little ways to go to get to NAB 2019 levels, but they're already surpassed 1,000. They're probably close to 1,100 by now, and they're still 2 months out. So they're going to get close to 2019 levels, okay, that they're going to. Oh, they're already surpassed 2019. I had a good time in 2019. I really enjoyed it. I got to see if Brad's coming. We used to drive around when Brad comes there. We drive around in the Bradmobile. IBC as well. There you go. IBC is another important event for pro video, pro cameras, pro audio. Is another one. So that's another important one. But anyway, WWDC. So let's go over some of these things we were talking about, that I've been talking about. We got another comment here real quick. I see what you're saying about WWDC, but I disagree. If they were having something in the App Store tied to Final Cut Pro to incentivize developers, I feel they would showcase it at WWDC. No, I don't agree. WWDC is, Final Cut Pro is this big at WWDC. I mean, it certainly can be there with some things, but not to the pro community. You're not going to reach NAB proportions of people that are interested in pro video productions at NAB. They're not, I mean, at WWDC. They're not going to be at WWDC. They're going to be at NAB, pro video. It's pro video, pro audio. It's broadcast. WWDC is much, 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 much broader. But anyway, Final Cut Pro at both events is fine. But they really need, they've done it in the past. They did it with 10.4.5. I showed you on a Sunday night. Where did ProRes RAW get announced? Did it get announced at WWDC? No. It got announced at NAB. There's been other Final Cut Pro updates centered around NAB. What happened last year? 10.6.2 came out right before NAB. No update came out at WWDC with features. NAB. They know that NAB is the place to be. They can certainly do something like with Apple Silicon and Final Cut Pro, but NAB is too important an event. It only comes once a year. They can do it with minimal amount of expense. They don't have to actually be there, although I wish the team would be there. That would be fantastic. Let's get into some of these videos that I was talking about. Well, first I'm going to bring this up. Let me bring this up first. So when we're talking about the people that have, 8 people have left the Pro Apps team in years. 8 people. Let me see if I can find this. That's that. Okay, I'm going to bring this list of names up real quick. Let me copy this, and I'm going to do a text. I'm not sure what's going on there. Let's do this. I'm going to bring these names up. Hold on with 1 second if you don't mind. Okay, I'm going to bring this down a little bit in size. Down in size. I'm going to add it to the thing. These are the people that have left the ProApp team for one reason or the other. These are 8 people that have left the ProApps team in the last 3 years, something like that, right when 10.5 came out. First one was Steve Bays, Estelle McGetchie, Wes Plate, Colleen Pendergast, Judd Copland, Xander Soren, Dan Sabota, and just recently, Luke Tristram. Look, that is a block of talented people. Now, I don't know the reason for each one individually, but as a block, that's a lot of talent that have left the ProApps team. Don't you agree? Does anybody think that's not a large portion of people? And the last 3, Xander Soren, Dan Sabota, and Luke Tristram, have left in the last 4 months. They have left in the last 4 months. So I think something's going on over there that's not perhaps conducive. And listen, if 10.7 comes out, it's a great update. That has less of an importance. But that's a lot of people. That's a lot of people. Let's go over and look at some. This is Luke Tristram, and let me see. Oh, that's a movie. I think this is Luke Tristram at LACPUG, and he also has Steve Bays there.
Good evening, everyone. As you can gather from the slide that's on the screen, we're here to talk about Final Cut Pro 10. And it's a brand new year, so 2018 has just started. So we thought it would be nice, as a little bit of a retrospective, to have a look at some of the great work that's been edited in Final Cut Pro 10 over the last 12 months.
That's Luke, and in the same presentation, Steve Bays.
Stops of exposure in that dynamic range. And of course, that's too much for high definition broadcast, right? Their X709 only does about 6 stops or so. So how do you get it within the HD specification? Well, you have to tone map it. You have to take that wide dynamic range and bring it into the more narrow range of high definition.
So those are two of the majors. Now, Steve Bays was the first to leave years ago. Luke just left recently, and he's moved back to Australia, and now he's a consultant for Apple. He's no longer an Apple employee. He's a consultant. Now, once again, I mean, no, we don't know what goes on internally in Apple, but Apple's a big corporation, and there's some people that just maybe just don't get along, or they don't agree with the direction things are taken. Don't know. Let's see what 10.7 brings, right? That's my point all along. Let's see what 10.7 brings. Let's go a couple more videos. I'm going to go a couple more because you might not know some of these people are on this list. On this list. You might not know who some of these people are. Let's watch them in action. We saw Steve Bays. Let's see who else we have. Here's Colleen from NAB. Once again, Apple at NAB, officially at NAB in 2019.
I'm Colleen Pendergast. I actually run the design team for Pro Video, so that's Final Cut, Motion, and Compressor. Like many of you, I've been coming to NAB and this event watching Michael talk for a long time because I was an independent editor prior to joining Apple about 15 years ago. I'm Colleen Pendergast. I actually...
So 15 years she was with Apple. She left the Pro Apps team. So that was 2019. Once again, Final Cut Pro at NAB. Official Apple Final Cut Pro at NAB. They were there 2017 officially in the convention center. 2018 officially, the Pro Apps team was there in the convention center. And in 2019, they were on stage. This wasn't officially at NAB. This was outside at the Super Meet event. It wasn't Super Meet. It was Faster Together stage. So that's another one. Let's see what else we have.
So to give us a demo of GarageBand on iPad, I'd like to invite Xander Soren, who's our Director of Music Marketing, to do that right now. Xander, all yours.
Morning. Thrilled to be able to show you GarageBand running on an iPad. This is
over the years, and in particular, thank you for helping to facilitate my switch to Mac. I was languishing in PC land for quite a while, so.
You do with Apple. I'm so happy you're moving on into the wine game, making great wine. You're a great.
Hey mate, you're a man of many talents, everyone knows that. And the Pinot Noir you make, I mean, what a combo. Whatever you do, you dig deep. You can't go.
So that was his co-workers that put that together and friends that he made over the years. He left. He's another one that left. There's a question here. Where are they now? Blackmagic, Adobe, any of them on the Final Cut Pro developer team? No, these people have all left Apple. Not just, well, Luke is a consultant. He's no longer an Apple employee where he gets benefits and 401k and all that. He's just a consultant. He moved back to Australia. He's been, I guess, in California for years. So he's no longer an Apple employee. He's an Apple consultant. A couple of them went to Frame.io, Airbnb. No, they went to Atomos. I think Atomos and then Airbnb, which is kind of strange. So they've been jumping around since Apple. I know Steve Bays is involved with ColorLab AI, or I think that's what it is. So he's involved with some things as well. Let's look at a couple more.
Hi, my name is Dan Svoboda, and I wanted to give you guys a quick tutorial in Paint X from CoreMelt. And
there's Dan doing his thing. Who else do we have? Estelle, she was with Atomos.
Capture really beautiful clips, so you want to make sure that, you know, at the point of capture, you know you've got the footage that you need, so being able to review your footage, annotate them with favourites to make post-production workflows faster, I think is really important.
So that's Estelle. And who else do we have? Oh, Wes, my friend Wes Plate, of course. Hey everyone. Look who I found outside of my house. He was wandering around. I'm not sure what he was doing on the East Coast, but he's here. Wes Plate. You're in California, right?
Wes? Actually, I'm in Washington State.
Washington State, that's right. So there's Wes. And who we have? Who else do we have? I think that's it. So that's some of the talent that have left the Pro Apps team. I just wanted to give them all a shout out. we appreciate all the work that you've done. And we absolutely appreciate what the Final Cut Pro team is doing now. You're doing a very good job. I just want you to do a little more feature updates, especially for around NAB. All right. So don't forget to go over there and subscribe on YouTube. Everyone over there, Richard Taylor TV, you can get notified of all these when we go live. So far, they've been pretty popular. These Final Cut Pro and Coffee on Saturday mornings at 10 o'clock Eastern. They're getting 600 to 700, 800 views across Facebook, YouTube, and even in Twitter. Twitter is interesting. I do a live stream and it just shows up and it's there. YouTube and Facebook are more popular. I think Facebook Live is probably the most popular one. Not positive. But anyway, Final Cut Pro team, thank you. Please get 10.7 out before NAB, around NAB. Make sure it's got features. Don't hold features back for any specific reason. There's no reason for that. You don't have to hold them back. Just put them out there. Give us some features. The faithful, I'm a faithful user. Like I said, I'm the eternal Final Cut Pro optimist. And I keep saying, okay, let's wait for the next big update. Let's wait for the next big update. But sometimes it's a little frustrating. So it's been with 10.5 and 10.6. Both of them are just like, mid-level upgrades. It's been years, I was expecting something big with 10.5, and it was silicon support mostly. 10.6 had a couple more. They had the tracking, the mask tracking and stuff. And then 10.6.2 came out right before NAB. Let's get 10.7 out right before NAB as well. Hold on a second. I got this to show you. This was the last in-person event, 2019. I'm sorry, 2022 was, but the last big one, it was 2019, the Faster Together stage. And we saw Apple on stage there. They were on stage there. There were also at NAB, there weren't any in 2022, but they used to have, Steve Martin used to put on the Guru Gathering, which was a dinner for Final Cut Pro enthusiasts. You paid a modest fee, you got dinner and stuff, and everybody got to hang out. That used to be on Monday. Was it Monday? I think it was Monday night before the Super Meet. Super Meet's on Tuesday. Yeah, Super Meet was on Tuesday. So that was on Monday night before the day before the Super Meet. The Guru Gathering last year. 2019, Faster Together LumaForge, which is now owned by OWC. They bought OWC. OWC bought them. But in 2019, they took over the Super Meet because it wasn't a Super Meet. They took over that event. And they also had a kind of Guru Gathering. It was a Faster Together stage event, an event you could be invited to. I think it was free to get in. I don't think there was any charge. And you could go to that. And once again, hundreds and hundreds of people were there, milling about, talking mostly about Final Cut Pro, some of it about LumaForge. I said LumaFusion, LumaForge stuff. So we didn't have that in 2022. Nobody put on a Final Cut Pro-centric event. Super Meet was probably the best event, and there was two events that I really liked at NAB. Number one, I got to meet and talk to Dan over there at Digital Anarchy, the guy that does Beauty Box and some other things, plugins, and I think I'll be doing the same this year, stopping by his booth and doing a live stream. And then there was a Super Meet, which was very, very cool. It was held outside. As a matter of fact, I got a picture of that somewhere. Well, there was a restaurant that it was on top of a building that was open. So there was a restaurant that was open and people went there and we had a really good time there. I saw Steve Martin there and I saw the two Final Cut Pro Dylans there. Speaking of that, let me get through these real quick. One more thing before we leave here for today. Let me pull that over there. So here's one tutorial that just came out from one of the Dylans. That's what I remembered it.
Before the technique is applied, it is that special sauce that camera manufacturers concoct. And here is years after. It is that special sauce that camera manufacturers concoct.
So that's one of the Dylans, Dylan John. And here is another one of the Dylans. The Final Cut bro, Dylan Bates.
Sponsored by anybody, but I do have affiliate links to all of these as well as. But if we wanted to, we could change it over to something like Super 16, and you'll see how that.
So these are this one is about the 10 must-have plugins for 2023. That's one of them, and there was also something else I wanted to bring up. Oh, here's a free plugin. Here's a free plugin. Free FCPX silent movie plugin from Peter. That's available over his website. If you need silent movie captions, Peter Wiggins. There we go. Also, yeah, that's fine. If you want to support me, you can do that over there at Richard Taylor, over there at Buy Me a Coffee. Last year I had over $200 in Buy Me a Coffee funds for NAB. But you just go to Buy Me a Coffee, search for Richard Taylor, and you can buy me a coffee to support NAB. I'll be talking about that more the closer we get to NAB, because I like coffee and I wouldn't mind the support. So anyway, we're going to get out of here for today. Thanks everybody for stopping in. These seem to be pretty popular. 10 a.m. Eastern Time, Saturday mornings. I might do 11 a.m. one time, but for the most part, I'll try to keep it consistent at 10 a.m. Final Cut Pro and coffee, right? That's what this is. So let's do this real quick. I'll turn the countdown. That's what we're going to keep on doing. This is episode 3. Oh, that's interesting. Oh, I got to turn down. That's why. Episode 3. Today is episode 3. We will try to do episode 4 next week. You know, like I said, I may not make it every week, but I think I'm going to do this on a regular basis. They seem to be popular. Just passing to say hi, Richard. Thank you, Amar. I appreciate it. I appreciate everybody that stops by. I'm going to start some NAB coverage shortly, but in the meantime, 10.7, 10.11, I mean 11, Final Cut Pro 11, 10.711, that's what I'm calling it. But I wanted to come on and talk about this exodus of the Final Cut Pro team. It's not, since we don't know, it's just curious. I'm making the association, others may as well. The slower pace of Final Cut Pro feature updates dramatically since 10.5, and the exodus of people on the Final Cut Pro apps team. They happened at the same time, and they're happening at the same time. So let's see, going forward, let's see what 10.7 brings. Does that sound fair? That'll be coming out in the next week, month, 2 months. At any point, they'll bring out 10.7/11, and it's got to have new features. You've got to give us new features. I mean, cheers to you. But you got to have new features no matter what you do. You gave us 2 features in 2022. Not enough. Both features were very good. You got to give us more than that. That's not enough. I mean, Blackmagic is choo. Blackmagic is like way, way past their development. I mean, Blackmagic is an incredible organization. They do everything. I mean, I understand that, but Final Cut Pro team, and I understand the other thing is it's not the Final Cut Pro team as much as perhaps Apple corporate, too many layers over top the Final Cut Pro team, doing things that aren't necessarily good for us users as Final Cut Pro editors. So one of the things, didn't Apple say they're going to have these conversations with pro editors in Hollywood? They've started that because we had Michael Yanovich on, and he said he's part of that group. He goes to the meetings and lets them know what's going on. But it's radio silence to the rest of the community. To the millions and millions of users, we don't know what's going on. A year ago, they released a beta and let it go public in March. That was the dupe detection and the voice isolation. What the heck was that? Do more of that. Let us see a beta feature before it comes out to let us know it's coming out. That's fine. That worked out well. But let the community know. You've got millions, 4 million, 5 million Final Cut Pro users out here, and you're doing things with this little group in Hollywood, which is fine. Let the rest of the community know as well. Send it to me. I'll broadcast it on here, with your permission, of course. I will never, if I talk to anybody, if I ever did talk to anybody in private about anything Final Cut Pro or Apple related, I would never talk about it without permission, without Apple's, agreeing to it or whatever. That's not what I do, okay? Though I hear things, of course I do. But I'm not going to talk about them. This information I got today is public knowledge. I got all those people's profiles on LinkedIn, every one of them. Looked at them, saw when they were at Apple, saw when they left Apple. It just is 3's left in the last 4 months. 3 of them have left in the last 4 months. And before that, we had another 5. Steve Bay's starting it. So when he left, those were kind of shocking events. Now, Steve might just want to retire. That's fine. But some of the other people, I think, are kind of young. Let me see what this says. I hope people at Apple are listening to you. They are indeed. They are indeed. As a matter of fact, look, I'll probably get a phone call right after this episode was over. And there's this guy named Tim that called me sometimes. And we talk about stuff, and he says, well, why did you say that? And I'll say, well, it's because it's what's happening. Apple listens to it. People on the Final Cut Pro team listen to it, to this podcast, to this broadcast. It's not really a podcast, but people have conflated YouTube videos with podcasts. They're not the same thing, but whatever. This broadcast, Final Cut TV. Don't forget, go over there on YouTube and subscribe. That would be great. Till the next episode, next Saturday, if anything happens during the week with Final Cut, if there's an update, if there's a bug fix update, whatever, I'll come back on the afternoon and we'll discuss it. One of the things I want to do with these events are give the opportunity to listeners to chime in. The other thing is you can come on here and make comments the whole week, even not just during the live event. You can keep on making comments and comments and comments, and people, we track those. I keep an idea what's going on there. All right, I'm going to get out of here for today. Thank you very much for stopping in. Don't forget to subscribe over there, and I'll see you the next time, next Saturday, hopefully, if not before. Talk to everybody later.